The scene was the Superdome in New Orleans. At stake, the WBC Super Welterweight Championship held by Wilfred Benitez, the 23-year-old from Puerto Rico who has held 3 world titles.
And Hearns finishes with a flurry. That's it. It's all over. And a great fight it was. Excellent fight. 2 good warriors.
I hated him. Those words came from a man who once seemed untouchable. Wilfred Benitez was called El Radar, the Bible of boxing, a defensive genius who could see punches before they were thrown. At 17, he became the youngest world champion in boxing history. He had the footwork of a dancer and the mind of a chess master. But today, he lies silent in a small apartment. He cannot walk, he cannot speak, he cannot recognize his own face in the mirror. The sport that made him a legend destroyed him completely. This is the story of 5 boxers who shaped his rise and his fall. These were not just opponents, they were rivals. He hated for different reasons. Each one left a mark that never healed. Each fight revealed another crack in the foundation of his genius. This is the tragedy of Wilfred Benitez, told through the 5 ghosts that haunted his entire career. March 6, 1976, San Juan, Puerto Rico. Wilfred Benitez walked into Hiram Bithorn Stadium as a boy. His high school classmates filled the seats. He was 17 years, 5 months, and 23 days old. Across the ring stood Antonio Cervantes, a legend, Kid Pambale, the WBA light welterweight champion, a 30-year-old warrior from Colombia. Cervantes had defended his title 10 times. He was on a 19-fight winning streak. He had beaten 2 Hall of Famers. People were talking about him fighting Roberto Duran next. Benitez was undefeated at 25 Soro, but nobody gave him a chance. He was a 4-1 underdog, a boy challenging a man. The experts thought he was too young, too inexperienced, too unprepared for this moment. The first 4 rounds were even, then something changed. In the 5th round, the teenager took over. His speed was extraordinary. His skill was unreal. He jabbed smartly. He made the champion miss his hooks. For 15 brutal rounds, the boy outboxed the man. Cervantes threw everything at him. Heavy punches, veteran tricks, nothing worked. When the final bell rang, Benitez won by split decision. He became the youngest world champion in boxing history, a record that will never be broken because of modern age rules. In his post-fight interview, he dedicated the win to his family and his country. One writer said he was too young to appreciate history, but old enough to have made it. The crowd went wild. Puerto Rico had a new hero, but here is the truth. Benitez did not hate Cervantes. He hated what the win did to him by reaching the top of the world at 17. He set a standard he could never match again. Every future victory would be measured against this impossible moment. This was his original sin. When you can rely on pure talent to beat a dominant champion at 17, you start to believe something dangerous. You start to believe hard work is for lesser fighters. You start to believe genius is enough. His own father would later write an article called "Why Benitez Won't Win," complaining that his son refused to train seriously. That attitude did not come from nowhere. It came from this night. The victory over Cervantes convinced him that his talent was a substitute for discipline. He thought his radar would always save him. He thought his natural gifts would always be enough. It was the greatest moment of his life, but it planted the seed of his destruction. This one perfect night gave him a false sense of security that would haunt him forever. By November 30th, 1979, Wilfred Benitez was a 2-division world champion, but now he faced his reflection. Sugar Ray Leonard was everything Benitez was. Fast, brilliant, defensively perfect, but Leonard was also the media darling, the Olympic hero, the golden boy. The fight at Caesar's Palace was billed as a chess match. Both were undefeated masters of the sweet science. The purses were over $1 million each. It was the richest non-heavyweight fight in history at that time. The pressure was insane. Benitez's own father publicly wrote that article saying his son would not win because he refused to train. Imagine that? Your own father betting against you in the biggest magazine in boxing before the first bell. The 2 fighters had one of the most intense stare-downs in boxing history. 30 seconds of nose-to-nose hatred, stone-cold faces. The crowd felt the electricity. This was personal. Leonard started fast in the 3rd round. He scored a flash knockdown with a sharp jab, but the knockdown woke Benitez up. He adjusted his style and began to use his defensive magic. Leonard later admitted, "I was not aware I was in a championship early because I hit him so easy. But then he adjusted to my style. It was like looking in a mirror." Benitez made Leonard miss over and over. Leonard's trainer, Angelo Dundee, begged him to attack the body because the head was too hard to hit. In the 6th round, an accidental clash of heads opened a deep cut on Benitez's forehead. Blood poured down his face for the rest of the fight. Despite the cut and the knockdown, the fight stayed competitive. It was a battle of feints and counters, subtle shifts in weight and angle, science versus science. 2 young masters testing each other. Then came the 15th and final round. Leonard was ahead on all 3 scorecards. He landed a left hand that put a tired Benitez down for the 2nd time. Benitez got up, but the referee stopped the fight. There were only 6 seconds left on the clock. 6 seconds? It was his first professional loss, a TKO that denied him the honor of finishing on his feet. After the fight, Leonard praised him. No one can make me miss punches like that. But then came the ultimate insult. Leonard refused to ever give him a rematch. For Benitez, this was unforgivable. It suggested that Leonard knew how close the fight was and wanted no part of a second encounter. The loss to his mirror image, the controversial stoppage, and the denial of redemption created a deep bitterness. But this wound became fuel. The humiliation of his first defeat would drive him to the most disciplined performance of his career. He would channel this hate into a cold, focused fury, and he would unleash it on another legend. Before his date with destiny against Roberto Duran, Wilfred Benitez had to make history again. On May 23, 1981, he moved up to the 154-pound division to challenge Maurice for the WBC Super Welterweight title. If he won, he would become the youngest three-division world champion in boxing history. Nobody had done it in 43 years since the legendary Henry Armstrong. But this fight revealed something troubling. Maurice was a tough, disciplined southpaw. He was durable and relentless. He kept pressing forward. He absorbed Benitez's shots and refused to be discouraged. Broadcast commentators noted that Benitez was getting a little frustrated. He seemed confused by his inability to stop the champion. For long stretches, Benitez was forced to tee off on who simply would not go down. The fight was tough and draining. Some observers noted that Benitez already had the look of a fading fighter. For 11 rounds, it was a grueling contest. Benitez was winning rounds, but not dominating. Kept coming. He kept throwing punches. He refused to quit. Benitez's punches, which had once seemed so sharp, were not having the same effect. Something was wrong. Then, in the 12th, came the flash. Benitez feinted, dipped, and unleashed a perfect overhand right. It landed flush on Hope's chin. The champion was knocked out instantly. He stayed on the canvas for 7 terrifying minutes before he could be helped to his feet. The knockout was named one of the best of the year. Benitez had secured his place in the history books. This victory is the perfect symbol of his entire career. Long periods of struggle and inconsistency, then one moment of breathtaking genius that covered up all the flaws. The frustration visible during the fight came from a deep place, a prodigy's anger that his opponent was not falling sooner. This pattern reinforced a dangerous idea that his natural gifts were a trump card he could play at any time, that he did not need round-by-round discipline. The knockout of Hope was historic. It was the last great offensive moment of his career, but the difficulty he faced getting there was a warning. The radar was still working, but the signal was fading. January 30th, 1982, this was a battle for the soul of Latin boxing. In one corner stood Roberto Duran, Manos de Piedra, Hands of Stone, the living legend, the embodiment of primal fury and intimidation. He was seeking redemption after the infamous No Moss surrender to Sugar Ray Leonard. In the other corner stood Wilfred Benitez, the cool, scientific craftsman, the defending WBC Super Welterweight champion. For Benitez, this fight was deeply personal. According to his camp, he was specially motivated. He had lived for years with the legend of Duran as the hero boxer of Latin America. He burned with the quiet conviction that he was the superior fighter. He believed the boxing world had it all wrong, that Duran's reputation was built on fear, not skill. The hate Benitez carried into this fight was not hot-blooded anger. It was cold, intellectual contempt. He disdained Duran's reputation, which was built on aggression and intimidation. Benitez viewed this style as primitive. His entire game plan was designed not just to win, but to systematically destroy the myth of Hands of Stone, to prove the superiority of boxing science over brute force. His post-fight assessment, delivered in broken English but with crystal clarity, was the ultimate dismissal. I am a smart boxer, and that is not good for him. What happened over 15 rounds at Caesar's Palace was a tactical surgery. Benitez executed a game plan that he, not his father, had created in the hours before the fight. After studying tapes of Duran's recent fights, Benitez found a crucial flaw. Opponents were afraid to throw right hands at him. Benitez vowed to do the opposite. From the opening bell, he speared Duran with daring right-hand leads, a risky punch that kept the brawler off balance and set up his own sharp left hooks. The result was a masterful display. The dominator was dominated, the intimidator could not intimidate. Benitez frustrated Duran at every turn. He made him miss wildly and countered with precision. In a final act of supreme confidence, after being wobbled in the 12th round, Benitez chose to engage Duran in a gorgeous street fight on the ropes in the 15th. He wanted to prove once and for all that he could beat the legend at his own game in his own territory. The unanimous decision victory was so complete that many ringside observers felt the official scorecards, which were relatively close, were an abomination. Duran's own legendary trainer, Ray Arkell, confessed he knew the fight was lost as early as the 3rd round. This victory was Benitez's masterpiece, the ultimate validation of his genius, but it was also his last great victory. Having achieved this perfect perfect cerebral assassination of a living icon. His deep motivation seemed to vanish. He had slain the dragon that represented everything he hated about boxing. The cold contempt that fueled his perfect preparation was spent. Now there was only the mundane reality of another title defense. In a moment of profound irony, Benitez advised after the fight that Duran has to take better care of himself and train harder. The very criticism that had been thrown at him his entire career, it showed a brilliant tactical mind that could see the flaws in any opponent but remained blind to the same failings in himself. December 3, 1982, the fight against Thomas Hearns was the final act of Wilfred Benitez's reign as world champion. The bout was held in the massive Louisiana Superdome as part of the Carnival of Champions card. It was the end of a 2-year saga. The fight had been postponed from the ill-fated This Is It event in 1981. A cloud of frustration hung over the event. Lagging ticket sales forced promoter Don King to convince both fighters to accept huge pay cuts from their original $1.5 million purses. For Benitez, the financial insult would pale compared to the professional humiliation he was about to suffer. The hate that defined this loss was the most devastating imaginable for a defensive artist, a man who called himself the Bible of boxing. The ultimate insult is not to be overpowered or knocked out. It is to be outthought, outmaneuvered, and outboxed. Thomas the Hitman Hearns was feared for having arguably the most destructive right hand in boxing history. Yet he did not beat Benitez with his power. He beat him with his brain. As one writer perfectly summarized, Hearns outboxed the master boxer. It was a fundamental destruction of Benitez's very identity as a fighter. The 15-round contest ended in a majority decision loss for Benitez. Hearns, typically the aggressor, adopted a different strategy. He used his huge height and reach advantages to control the distance with his jab. He boxed smartly from the outside. He scored a clean knockdown in the 5th round with a right hand. Benitez was credited with a knockdown of his own in the 9th, but replays clearly showed it was a phantom knockdown. Hearns had simply stumbled after Benitez stepped on his foot. Most remarkably, Hearns suffered a major injury to his right hand. In the 8th round, he was forced to fight for nearly half the bout using almost only his left hand. Yet he still did enough to win on the scorecards. This made the loss even more painful for Benitez. He could not even beat a one-handed opponent. This defeat was the definitive end of Benitez's time at the top. It was the last world title he would ever hold. It was his last truly great performance. Even in a losing effort from this point on, his career went into a steep and rapid decline. The loss to Hearns was a symbolic triumph of disciplined strategy over inconsistent genius. Hearns, known as a cannon, adapted his style specifically for the challenge. He showed a versatility that Benitez, who relied on his standard set of defensive skills, could not match. The loss made Benitez the unofficial 5th king, a fighter with all the talent to belong to the exclusive club of Leonard, Duran, Hagler, and Hearns, but who ultimately lacked the consistent discipline and focus to claim a permanent seat at their table. The bitterness of this final humiliation was in being beaten at his own game, a checkmate that signaled the end of his reign. The career of Wilfred Benitez, viewed through these 5 rivalries, unfolds as a tragedy in 5 acts. It began with the impossible pressure of his historic victory over Antonio Cervantes, a feat so huge it created a standard he could never meet again. This was followed by the deep bitterness of his first defeat to Sugar Ray Leonard, a loss to his own reflection that was made unforgivable by the denial of a rematch. His last great offensive display, the brutal knockout of Maurice was a grueling fight that exposed his frustrations and showed his physical decline. He reached his absolute peak in the cold, cerebral assassination of Roberto Duran, a victory so complete that it seemed to burn out the motivational fire that fueled it. Finally, his era ended with the ultimate humiliation against Thomas Hearns, where the master boxer was, for the first time, decisively outboxed. The weight of these conflicts was unsustainable for a fighter who lacked a foundation of discipline. The pressure to be perfect, the sting of the first loss, the frustration of a draining battle, the emotional peak of destroying a legend, and the humiliation of being outmastered. Benitez was a fighter of brilliant moments, not of sustained greatness. The complex hates that drove his most brilliant performances were the same forces that burned him out. They left him with little motivation for the long, hard road required to stay at the top. His decline in the ring is connected to his tragic fate. Outside of it, the most heartbreaking moment came years later. During a visit from Sugar Ray Leonard, Benitez, his memory destroyed by his condition, watched a replay of their classic fight in a moment of brief clarity. He turned to his old rival and said, "Ray, I did not train for that fight." In that single, devastating admission lies the entire tragedy of Wilfred Benitez. It is the confession of a genius who knew, all too late, that talent alone was never enough. The final image is of the silent champion, a man whose body paid the ultimate price for a career defined by conflict. Both with the legends in the opposite corner and with the undisciplined prodigy within, the echoes of those 5 great rivalries, once the soundtrack to a golden era, are now lost in a profound and tragic silence.